What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another hour of Anti-Media. I hope everyone's safe. There's a lot of storms, a lot of fires going on all over the place. And I myself am here in Portland, and we got a lot of fires burning here. So I hope everyone's safe down in Florida. I hope people are recovering well in Houston. And there's probably going to be more hurricanes. But the show tonight, I mean, there's plenty of news coverage on hurricanes, and it's important. But what we're going to do tonight is actually a belated debate concerning nuclear North Korea and what we should do about it. And I'm going to have a few guests on. My co-host, DB Schwartz, will be joining me momentarily. In fact, here he is. One second. But, this is North Korea. I just started Googling North Korea instead of DB on Skype. That's hilarious. So North Korea, they kind of established this desire for nuclear weapons as far back as like World War II, and everyone knows why. In this world, nuclear weapons give you a bargaining chip. They pretty much put you at the table. There's like 9 countries with nuclear powers at this point. And I think that would make them the 10th, or maybe they're the 9th.
What's the list, Jake?
Oh, U.S., Russia, India, Pakistan, China,
and Taiwan, don't forget.
Taiwan has them? Israel.
They have a lot of them, yeah.
Israel,
yeah.
Israel for sure. India.
South Africa probably has a couple.
They probably got a couple, yeah. So
they said they dismantled them, but I don't think if you're smart, you do that.
But the rhetoric really ratcheted up. This really became a geopolitical crisis, so to speak, in around 2006, and that's when they started. I had my buddy texting me: Pakistan, Israel, England, China. Keep going,
France.
Daniel. France.
I don't know if Italy does. I don't think we trusted any of the Axis guys.
Yeah. Thank you, Daniel. Man, of course, the United States. Yeah, I think we got a few. Russia, we wouldn't mention them. So at the time these tests started, the current leader's father, Kim Jong-il, they had a yield of like 1 kiloton, less than 1 kiloton. For context, the bomb we dropped on Hiroshima was about 15 kilotons. But things have escalated, and throughout the wars in the Middle East, which is an issue I'm going to bring up tonight, as we squandered our resources in the Middle East, we let a lion go through puberty. That's the best way I can describe North Korea, because as of reports from last week, North Korea affixed a hydrogen bomb to an intercontinental or an ICBM, which means, and the numbers on that means that that bomb has the power of anywhere from 50 to 100 kilotons. The question is whether it has a minimum range of about 3,400 miles. Now, I personally think North Korea would not be a threat if we would just leave them the fuck alone. They have never attacked anyone. They're certainly not good to their neighbors. But who have they attacked?
But they have trillions of rare earth minerals. We have to liberate those minerals.
We must liberate them. So I don't really. I say leave them alone. And of course, Lou Costa-Giovanni. I never get his name right. I'm going to have to get that right tonight. From Occupy Democrats, made a statement a few weeks ago saying that we should go to war with North Korea. It would be the first morally war since World War II. And he has a very articulate argument as to why. I disagree with him, particularly because of events that have happened since we decided to have this debate. But it's there's all kinds of stats we can throw out there that'll scare the shit out of you. But when it comes right down to it, the world is a dangerous place, and we're not going to like everyone that has a nuclear weapon. But we have this principle established called mutually assured destruction, man. It got us through the Cold War. And we have to abide by it. And, that's
the crazy thing.
A good note for my friend Daniel here, and I actually meant to mention this. Libya is actually what gave it its chemical and nuclear weapons program. And then, we all know what happened to Gaddafi after that. So I believe Pakistan was what originally, I think Pakistan is who originally gave them the materials, and then Libya allowed them to refine it.
Well, Pakistan gave North Korea the ICBM tech through the Awan brothers, who are now making a plea deal, and left supposedly left that laptop to be found by the Washington PD and opened this can of worms that no mainstream media is talking about. And I don't even want to get into it, because until this trial starts, and there will be a massive trial, and it's going to take the DNC apart, you're going to find that a lot of these things that we're facing now today that make the world a dangerous place is because straight up we've had traitors in the highest levels of our government for the last 40 plus years, probably really the last 70 plus years.
Yeah, it's a complicated issue. I believe Obama told Trump, as Trump came into office, well, I think the first thing Obama said is, are you fucking kidding me? Then the second thing he said is, Donald? I'm not going to do it. He said to Trump that a nuclear North Korea is probably going to be one of the biggest issues he faces, because at this point, there's really not a lot you can do. And why would you? Why risk millions of people to the north and to the south of Korea?
All you can do is what we talked about before, which is just a bunch of airdrops.
And why risk this triangulation with China that's going to come about? I think that's even more scary than anything. Is pissing China off, or making China thinks it has to neutralize us in some way. But these are all things we're going to bring up. Lou should be joining us soon. We're also going to have journalist Claire Bernish join us at about past. So it should be a good show. We're certainly not going to resolve the issue, but we're going to express some viewpoints on it. And I think it's important because over the next weeks, months, years, there's going to be endless rhetoric about North Korea from mainstream media. And their corporate coffers are telling them what to say. So it's good to have some alternative media to fill in some of that headspace there. And that's what we're going to try and do tonight. I am in no way an expert on North Korea. I don't really think Lou is either, except that he has done a lot of research. Particularly, he's read the reports issued by Chris Hedges, who before his death did a pretty phenomenal investigative job. I have that right? It's Chris Hedges, right?
Well, the main thing to know about North Korea is they take our idea of military spending and then, make it even more extreme, if you can even imagine that. I think it's something near 80% of their GDP goes to the military. So, yeah, they're a small hermit kingdom, but they sit on top of the world's biggest, basically untouched uranium mines, which makes them a nuclear power. And it's a different kind of nuclear power where, they just have nuclear mortars. They have thousands of them. So you can't send troops in, because then they just start shelling South Korea, and that can't happen. So yeah. I don't know what we do either, Jake, because the only thing I can think of is we're going to have to use space-based weapons on them, and that shows our hand to China. And showing our hand to China is giving them a strategic advantage for the real war that everybody knows is coming eventually. Yep. Maybe we're not going to live through that, Jake. Maybe that's in 70 years.
No, it's not.
Someday we're going to run out of resources, and so are they, and we're going to fight over what's left. We know it's going to happen.
We know what's happening. So there was an interesting report by The Intercept this week that was basically saying Kim Jong-un has basically put up his nuclear weapons as a bargaining chip, and that he is willing to discuss denuclearizing, but that the Washington Post will not report on that. Now, that wouldn't be surprising to me. I shared this article on Facebook. Of course, it literally digital tumbleweeds went by. So I think there's a very good chance that we could find peace with North Korea. And, of course, from Trump's point of view, you do that, and you got yourself a second term. If you figure out a way to denuclearize North Korea, you got yourself a second term.
Well, the way the DNC is going to go down, and they're basically committing suicide right now, they're done anyway, man. So, yeah, second term's almost all but assured, and everybody that's screaming for impeachment are just clueless. They just don't even understand what's really going on right now.
Well, I don't think he'll be impeached, but I don't think...
How can you impeach him when half the DNC is about to just go to jail?
Well, I just said I think he's going to be impeached, but I also don't think he's going to win a second term. I'm going to go ahead and bring in Lou here. Lou is a writer for Occupy Democrats. He's written for a number of publications, including the Anti-Media. He's based out of Las Vegas. Lou, how you doing tonight?
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you very well.
Fantastic.
Good to have you, buddy.
Oh, yeah, thanks for having me on your show. Should disclose that I know, Jake, we've gotten drunk before in the wonderful Sin City.
Yeah, we got drunk. I mean, I would like to get drunk with you more. In fact, I think we have a standing arrangement to shoot guns together there sometime.
This is true.
And not in a range. Like, I'm talking about like at a mall or something.
Well, I don't know if you can say that in public without getting arrested, but...
Well, yeah, you're right. I'll probably get arrested for that. But sarcasm goes a long way in a criminal defense situation. But Lou, I follow you. I follow you very well. I'm still laughing about my comment. I follow your Facebook posts a lot. You're a good writer. I like your writing style, and you make very convincing arguments. You sometimes convince me on things that I previously disagreed on, which is always a good thing. Now, on this particular argument, you made a Facebook post, and you cited some really interesting information from it was Chris Hedges, right?
It was Christopher Hitchens. Chris Hedges is kind of
like
I guess he's like the number 3 intellectual in the world since Christopher Hitchens and Gore Vidal are now dead. But yeah, it's Hitchens, not Hedges.
And he did basically an unprecedented infiltration of North Korea.
Right. He wrote a very sweeping article about it, detailing the horrendous living conditions for the people of North Korea. And that's what I'm going to be talking about in this segment. I'm not going to be talking about anything that has to do with the Trump administration's rationale for going to war with North Korea. As a matter of fact, I don't think that I've read many individuals at all who are going to put forth the argument that I'm going to bring to you this evening. So, I guess we'll see. Right. I don't expect that I'm going to win or that I'm going to change your mind, but I just think that these things should be said.
Oh, great. No, that's great. And that's why I'm having you on. And I mean, things have changed a little bit in the 2 weeks since we've been talking about having this conversation. And for the record, I don't really consider this debate. This is more of a conversation. But I mean, since we've talked about it, it's come, to the international attention of the international community that they do in fact have a hydrogen weapon, and they can attach it to an ICBM. And
correct.
And it basically at this point sounds like we'd be attacking them with extreme existential peril. But that's I know you don't want to get. I mean, that is something that we do have to address. But I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, your argument is strictly one of a moralistic argument.
Well, it's a humanitarian argument. Right. It's the argument that the people of North Korea, 25 million people in North Korea who all live as abject slaves in the most horrific conditions on the planet. North Korea is the number 1 violator of human rights in the world. course, there's going to be individuals on your network and people who are listening going to say the United States is the number one violator of human rights. But they're two completely different things. Right? They're two completely different arguments. We're talking about people in North Korea who, the people of North Korea are some of the smallest people in the world, right? They're the smallest people in the world because they don't have access to nutrients. So their bodies aren't allowed to grow. That's the type of horrific conditions we're talking about. We're not talking about, how the United States is a bully militarily, which is how I think that a lot of individuals would like to frame this. I was hoping that Editor-in-Chief Mr. Burnaby would be on with us so that he could talk about that, because that's his point that's been made as to why the United States doesn't have a, quote, moral standing to initiate war against North Korea. Is that your position as well? The United States doesn't have the moral standing?
King Burnaby will probably not be joining us. That guy works like 15-hour days. But I'll try and approximate his argument a little bit. We will be having Claire Bernish on at half past to give her perspective, and of course she disagrees with you. But quite frankly, I don't think we should be going to war right now, particularly with a country that just said they have a hydrogen bomb. But I am interested in your argument. You said this would be the first morally justified war since World War II.
Indeed.
So maybe you can start there and just summarize for our listeners kind of some of the points you were making in that original Facebook post.
Okay. Well, the post you're talking about was back, I don't know, back at the beginning of August. It's not the first time I've written about this subject. I've been advocating for war against North Korea for years and years, as long as I've been an internet commentator. And to me, it's quite simple. There are 25 million individuals who live in North Korea who are slaves. These individuals don't have any sort of liberty or any sort of privacy whatsoever. They live under complete control of the state. And if they did not bend to the state's will, they're executed in public. And not only if they do something wrong, they're executed, but their families are executed to make a point that individuals should comply. For people to turn a blind eye to this, or to make just the nonsensical argument, the convenient argument that, well, there are other evils in the world, so what about those as well? That's a fair point. There are other evils in the world. But now you have North Korea, as you've just said, has a hydrogen bomb now. So, and we can go back and look at the history of North Korea and how this began to happen, which I think would be very important to touch on. But you're saying because North Korea now has a hydrogen bomb, they should be left alone. Well, isn't that the exact opposite?
Because I don't want to die in a nuclear holocaust.
Right. Perhaps. Right.
Perhaps.
Well, who's to say what would? Who's to say what exactly would happen? Right. But now you have a situation where there's a belligerent nation who now has a weapon that can cause mass destruction, and to just leave it alone, to say, okay, now that they have this weapon, and goodness gracious, if we leave them alone, nothing's going to happen to the United States now.
Well, who have they attacked before?
What do you mean, who have they attacked? Like, are you making...
Who has North Korea attacked besides their own people?
In South Korea.
So when they've issued multiple statements saying the only reason they would attack someone else is if they were attacked.
Sure.
Right?
That's what they say, of course. And
well, have they done anything to make you think they wouldn't done that? They've been testing weapons for 15 years. They've never attacked anyone.
Well, I don't think that that's the basis of the argument anyway. I'm just looking at your point that's saying that because they have a hydrogen bomb, now they should definitely be left alone. That's never been the basis of my argument, because the basis of my argument is about liberating the people of North Korea, liberating this ultimate evil from the face of the earth. You have children who are forced to walk down the streets every day. Can you imagine this in America, where school children walk to school with a picture of Donald Trump, and they have to stare at the picture of Donald Trump, and they have to talk to the picture and say how much they love Donald Trump the whole way to school and the whole way home, and their entire education process is an indoctrination.
Right.
How can people turn a blind eye to this and say that this is okay?
Well, I don't think
that's what's mind-boggling to me about the anti-war argument.
I really think a lot of people are aware that it's bad. It's a bad situation.
It's a horrible. I mean, when you say a
but
bad,
is it really that much critically different to you than, say, Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, and Syria?
I mean, I would. Is it critically different?
Different. Take out the word critically. Is it different?
Well, of course, all the situations are different. This is, I think, where it gets a little bit convoluted because we start to talk when it's a little generalized. Now, of course, you could compare the atrocities in the nation of North Korea to the atrocities in Saudi Arabia or Iraq or Iran or anywhere else that has an authoritarian, violent government. Now,
so what makes this different?
What makes it different to me? And see, this is where I feel the argument gets a little curbed anyway, because it's already turning into, because there's evil in other parts of the world, that evil shouldn't be destroyed elsewhere.
But those evils don't have a hydrogen bomb that can reach the West Coast, man.
That's right. They don't have one. So wouldn't that mean that this should be the one that should be eliminated first?
If we can take it out through some kind of technological subterfuge that we don't know about, go for it. But if you're talking about tempting someone, he's literally saying, you attack me, I'm going to nuke you. Now, call me crazy, but to me, the proper course of action there is, look, the time, and I agree with you on, this is an issue that should have been addressed in the two previous administrations. I agree with you there.
It should have been addressed in the 1950s before General MacArthur was fired for attempting to
absolutely
the North Korean regime then. You see, this is all of this is a gigantic problem, Jake, because the United States government did not finish the job that it started 60 years ago, right? When President Truman fired MacArthur for not following his direct orders because MacArthur wanted to continue in North Korea, wanted to obliterate the government. And that's not what happened. And instead, now you see the result of that foreign policy, don't we? We see the result of that. We see the result of China being stronger. We see the result of now there's a very dangerous North Korea. So, yeah, it is a foreign policy blunder. It's a blunder that should have been corrected 60 years ago.
But with it not being handled, you're saying that it's worth going through another regime change campaign.
Oh, absolutely.
At the risk of a nuclear attack on South Korea, surrounding countries, and possibly the U.S. You think it's worth that risk?
Well, I'm not sure if there's a guarantee that any of that would actually happen anyway.
Is it worth the risk, though? You don't know.
See, here's a question. Here's a question of worth the risk. You know, you have 25 million people in North Korea. Is it worth the risk of allowing these individuals to live their lives as slaves for the next 20 generations of individuals in this country to live their life as slaves?
Why not?
For these people, for their families to be slaughtered, for their families to have no sense of peace, for their families to live in terror the entirety of their lives. 25 million people go through this every single day.
It's a terrible state, but it is a sovereign country. You know.
Well, so what? So what if it's a sovereign country? My mother said that anything
we're not supposed to actively attack other countries. There's actually something called the Geneva Conventions that establish that.
I see. So now we're getting into the ethics of all of it. And I think it's very ethical for people to turn a blind eye for 25 million individuals living as slaves. You know, it's so bizarre to me for the peace-loving individuals of the world to not want to rectify this situation. So let's let this little hole of terror go on and on and on and say, oh, well, you know, that's just the cost of doing business. And it would be very nice. It's very nice for the people of North Korea. It's very ironic that now, because we have President Trump, psychopath that he is, that he's really the only hope for the people of North Korea. I mean, how sad and bizarre is that we have a president who might be crazy enough to actually do something that might allow these individuals a chance to be liberated from the tyranny that they're suffering under. I'm
just trying to understand. I mean, I know you took this position 2 weeks ago.
I've been holding this position.
You've had it for a while, but it's just really hard for me to reconcile. It's hard for me. I honestly feel like there's some cognitive dissonance going on in how you could equivocate the risk of allowing people to continue living in the conditions they were already living in. Which, by the way, the best way in my opinion, for the people of North Korea to rise above is let's look at the coups that we've implemented in Libya and Syria. Why are we not doing that? Why are we not doing that in North Korea? Let's try some coups. Let's try some education before we try to liberating them would be great. People being liberated from a dictatorship is always great, but is it worth risking the world? Is it worth the world? That's what we're talking about here.
It's strange to me because it seems like you're not, there are other scenarios that are not being considered. Like North Korea becoming as more and more belligerent by the day and now showing that they have access to this technology to create hydrogen weapons. They're going to provoke Japan into becoming a nuclear state, because Japan right now, their constitution says that they can't have nuclear weapons. But that could always change. And Japan has the technology to have nuclear weapons, right? So all Japan has to do is, they have all the pieces in their country. All they have to do is have a vote, and all of a sudden they become a nuclear power, which then becomes a concern for China. So if the North Korean threat isn't removed, it could create a larger conflict between Japan and China, which could cause an even larger war. That's the issue that I think a lot of individuals are missing in this discussion. Right? Is that even something that's being considered? And I also think it's interesting, or it's telling how the suffering of the people of North Korea is just kind of whitewashed by you. It's like, well, tough shit. That's what happens. I mean, because I take the anti-media network.
I don't think that's a fair characterization.
That's how it sounds to me.
It sounds to me like I want them to be enslaved.
No, it just sounds like it's kind of whitewashing. It's like I don't know, like all of our friends. Hold on, let's make another point.
Move on from that point because it wasn't a good one.
I thought it was a very fair point. You could go ahead and defend against it if you want to, but I'm gonna bring out some more evidence to bring that point out. It's like our friend Carrie Wedler's video, another person who writes for Anti-Media. She put out a video, and it was she put out this video, had like 1.7, 1.8 million views, talking about how war with North Korea. She's pretty much articulating the same position that you're articulating. And then she spent a whole 4 or 5 seconds talking about the atrocities that happened to the North Korean people. And it says the government's oppressive and authoritarian. If you don't know much about the extent of this control, you should look into it. Boom. That was it. That's all that was said. Nobody's talking about how much these people suffer on a daily basis. Why not? Why is this something that is championed constantly? Right?
I agree.
Why not?
I can see your point there. I mean, and that's definitely a point that, in general, the mainstream media and most Americans turned a blind eye to the suffering of the rest of the world. We've turned a blind eye to the suffering of people in Iraq, to the suffering of people in Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, Yemen. I mean, Somalia. I mean, it goes across the board. I mean, we've been part of a neo-colonialist empire that has been ravaging countries, and we turn a blind eye to that. We turn a blind eye to dictatorships all across the world, and this is a particularly tough issue. What I don't understand is why this issue, which comes with the caveat of a hydrogen bomb, why this elevates to the point of moral authority.
I'm not sure that I haven't made the argument of moral authority. I see that a lot of anti-media people make the argument of moral authority. That's why I hope Nicholas would be here, because that's pretty much been his main point, and he's not going to be able to defend himself against all of this, but he was talking about it back in April, right? He said the United States doesn't have moral authority.
Well, we don't have Nick, but we do have journalist Claire Bernish joining us now, and she's gonna send her opinion abroad. Claire, what is your opinion on this? What's your general opinion on the North Korea situation? And then we'll move into approaching Lou's argument.
I believe we absolutely should not go to war with North Korea, and I feel that the only reason we are in this position is because of hapless U.S. policy, very aggressive policy. It's a deflection from a lot of other theaters of war, in my opinion. A lot of policy at home that's really bad and becoming more and more authoritarian. It's a deflection from a great many things. And one of the reasons it's effectively so is like the argument of humanitarianism. But, honestly, we've seen this argument with virtually every war that the U.S. tries to claim when we go to war. When we are the aggressor, we claim some sort of humanitarian thing. And I get where there might be an argument here because, indeed, this is a fascist state that is a human rights abuser. But when you look at the cost of that, when you look at some of the details, it doesn't necessarily add up. And I don't believe that humanitarian mission, if there could be called one here, could outweigh the other issues that we have. And one of them is that, for one thing, the people on both sides, from reports that we have seen in the media, say that they would actually like to have a unified Korea. And some of the South Korea's government would actually like the same. North Korea has kind of been provoked into this, fascist stance, but the people don't want the U.S. to be the interventionist here and to be the go-between. They want it to be an issue solved between their two states. So there's that. That's a fairly strong argument in that case. There's also the case that if we use the humanitarian cover to go in, we have to look at the resources that North Korea is either known or rumored to have. And one of those is the world's second largest opium poppy supply. So once we do this humanitarian mission, you know that it's going to be a lot more than that. And there's going to be a lot of puppeteering of government, and there's going to be a big mess if we're successful at all. And then we're going to, plunder the land as always. So there's another factor to consider there. Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to go on.
So Lou, what's your response to that?
Hello, Claire. That was very, very interesting. I mean, it's almost like people are making my argument for me. Claire started out by saying it was a hapless policy of the United States, and I agree. But she said this was caused by hapless policy, but I agree that this was hapless policy, as I said earlier in the segment, from the 1950s, when the United States should have moved forward and destroyed North Korea when it had the opportunity, and instead look where we are now. Part of the problem, of course, the United States does not have a coherent foreign policy anywhere around the world. It's very reactionary. But I'm not of the opinion that because bad decisions have been made in the past in Iraq, in Iran, obviously, in Syria, that the right decision couldn't be made here. And it's true.
In Afghanistan and Libya and et cetera, and Somalia.
Right, but I just feel that's, it's like saying if bad decisions have been made in the past, that correct decisions can't be made now.
I can't.
What about this government? It gives you confidence that a right decision could possibly be made now.
Well, what I know is that there are 25 million individuals who live in terror every day of their lives. People who don't have any form of privacy, whose families are executed if they accidentally scribble a marking on a newspaper of a picture of Kim Jong-un. That seems to me to be something of, the people of the United States who are so caring about, lions that get slaughtered in Africa and worried about statues and all this other nonsense. Why aren't they worried about actual suffering that's happening around the globe?
That's an argument that the State Department makes anytime we go to war, and there's always people suffering in the countries we go to war.
Right.
The difference here is that there's nuclear weapons involved.
There's nuclear weapons involved as of the last week. But essentially, what you guys are saying is, listen, North Korean people, tough shit. That's essentially what you guys are saying. Right?
That's not true.
Tough shit.
Me and Jake argued, last show about, well, at least I argue my solution, which is we need to airdrop arms, food, and medicine and just let them fight it out. And if they don't take the arms and want to stay under tyrannical overreach and they're that scared, then we did what we could.
I feel that, listen, the United States now, due to globalization and everything else, our economy and our security is tied to incidents that happen around the world, right? I think everybody is going to agree on that our prosperity can be impacted by situations such as this, by situations such as North Korea forcing Japan to abandon their lack of a nuclear weapon and start to have them. Now, why that isn't being discussed and the dangers of Japan possessing nuclear weapons as a result of this North Korean belligerence has not been being brought forth. I don't know why. I think because it impacts the argument that North Korea should be left alone. It's to me, it's kind of disingenuous. It seems like the main points are just kind of whitewashed aside, and I
don't agree with that at all. I don't think anybody's whitewashing it. I think that people are more seeing this expansive empire, and in its dying days, by almost everybody's sort of unanimous assertion, I mean, this empire does not need to be spread even more thinly anywhere else in the world. We're like in 152 nations out of 96 on the entire planet. We don't need to go into yet another nation that we know we're going to screw up with a government that can't even hold itself together anymore. This is a failed mission. This is not going to be a humanitarian good thing if we can't keep it together enough to make it happen that way.
I mean, I certainly understand the point, there being the United States spread too thin. Now, I guess, in a hypothetical situation, because we're discussing hypotheticals and hypotheticals are fun, let's just assume that the United States took this isolationism posture that most of the listeners of this network enjoy, right? And all of the United States bases were abandoned, all of our troops were here. Then would it make sense to attack North Korea if we weren't spread so thin? Then would it make sense to try and liberate these 25 million people who live as slaves in terror every day of their lives?
No, it might then be a debatable point.
They have a hydrogen bomb.
It might then be a debatable point, at least. If there were some sort of standing to make it so that it would be a successful humanitarian mission, it would at least be a point for people who believe in the military to debate, and it could be something that might be feasible. But at this point, you can't argue humanitarianism when you know going in there it's going to be bungled, and we're going to be there for a very long time, and there's opium, so we're going to be there even longer. So humanitarianism is going to take a back seat.
Well, of course, and not to mention the opium and then the trillions of dollars of minerals. Listen, I don't profess to be any type of military wizard to explain how this conflict could be resolved. I know that in terms of evil in the world, this is the greatest evil right now. Right? These are the individuals that are ranked the number one violator of human rights, which is something that takes a lot of accomplishing to do, to beat out Saudi Arabia and other nations like that behead gay people. Right? Doesn't that strike all of you as wrong, that this is happening in the world and that nothing can be done?
Well, we also incarcerate millions of people for growing plants. I mean, is that not a...
Yeah.
Well, here we go. It's just a false equivocation. It's not
a false equivocation.
Yes, it is.
How is that false?
It is a false... Wait,
it's
stop.
It's draconian.
It is a false equivocation, but it doesn't matter because it needs to be made anyway. Because that's a very good point about being spread thinly across the planet, too. We are falling apart in this damn country, and nobody is doing anything about it. All of the money is going to the stupid military. We need it here. I mean, if you're going to make the status argument, you have to at least address that.
And if we ever try to cut that budget down,
the prison, the industrial...
It's not a false equivocation. Just let me make this point. You're arguing civil rights abuses in North Korea.
It's not civil rights abuses. It's not like black people are being beaten for trying to get a sandwich at a counter. We're talking about families that are summarily executed because they don't cry in the presence of Kim Jong-un.
Right, it's a dictatorship.
Perhaps the definition of civil rights... The definition of civil rights abuse should be expanded upon if that's the language you want to use.
We have a soft version of that here, where people who are doing nothing more than growing plants are spending 20 years in prison. Now, that's not the same, but it's certainly up there. Do you not? I mean, there's hundreds of thousands of people, actually probably millions over the course of the last 3 decades, who have gone to prison, who have lived their lives in prison for doing nothing more than growing or selling marijuana. Now,
what about veterans? What about veterans care? What about care for the homeless? What about the explosive homeless population and the criminalization of it, and how nobody's addressing that problem?
Listen, I agree with you guys. There's lots of bad shit that happens. And, we could go on a case-by-case, point-by-point thing and examine individual cases of individuals who are convicted of possessing and growing and distributing marijuana, right? But is somebody who's going to prison, because, I don't know, it kind of make it sound like people are just growing a couple of plants in their backyard and they're in prison for the rest of their lives rather than they're growing a lot and profiting from it.
Who cares? It's a harmless drug. It doesn't matter.
I'm just saying the argument needs to be more articulate. That's all. I don't like the generalizations of all of it when we're talking about suffering in North Korea.
I'm sorry if I was specious.
I have a question.
We have much draconian policy here. We're not as bad as North Korea. But, we're
not as bad as North Korea. Our people aren't being executed for not praising pictures of Donald Trump. You're right. We're not nearly as bad as North Korea. Isn't it kind of offensive to say that the United States is anywhere near as bad as North Korea? That's why I was hoping Mr. Burnaby would be on here, because that's the point that he made. He literally said that the United States government is more oppressive. It says the U.S. is more evil than North Korea back on April 14th of this year. To me, it's just such a nonsense point to make. The United States is nowhere near as oppressive as this regime. The United States isn't executing its people.
Well, let me fill in for a little bit for Nick. I think this might have...
Seriously, let me ask a question. I have a question on this point that's really imperative. What makes it the United States business to do this in the first place? Why, if this is such an important mission, why can't our Western allies undertake this mission? Why does it have to be ours?
What is the prerogative of the United States doing this? It reminds me of a quote from Theodore Roosevelt, who says the United States of America has not the option as to whether it will not play a great part in the world, for it must play a great part. All that it can decide is whether it will play the part well or badly. I think we all agree that the United States is playing the role extremely poor. That doesn't mean that the United States couldn't, not that it's going to happen. This isn't the argument being presented by the Trump administration. But it doesn't mean that the United States couldn't start to do the morally righteous thing.
Wait, who is that quote from?
What's that?
Who is the quote from?
That was Theodore Roosevelt.
Okay. So I think...
But
I think Nick's point would probably have been that because of our imperialist outreach, that we have committed just as many human atrocities abroad as North Korea has done domestically.
No.
Let me finish. Just within this last 2 years, we've reached the number of deaths abroad in the Middle East that equal the Vietnam War. And now these aren't American deaths because we're using drones and we're using better technology now. But you're talking about 1.6 million deaths. 1.6 million, that's a conservative estimate, of people we've killed in the Middle East. Now, you're talking about 20 million people that are under draconian rule, fascist rule. And no one's arguing that that's not a bad thing. I think it's horrifying, and I don't think anyone's disagreeing with you there. But even if we didn't have the nuclear question attached to it, I think it would be a very, very difficult argument to make. But when you have the nuclear weapons added in, and the fact that he has said the only reason he would use them is if we attack them, why in God's name would you go and attack them?
Well, there's no other nation in the world that has the ability to impact the situation other than the United States. And the reality, of course, if the United States seeks to be more secure, that goes hand in hand with making the rest of the world more secure. Now, North Korea just recently, right? It's very convenient for this debate, this argument, this discussion, that they've come up with their hydrogen bomb, because otherwise, what would the argument be, right? Then you'd be talking about defending the people of South Korea rather than the hydrogen weapon.
Well, they've been pushing ICBMs for the last 10 years, man. The hydrogen thing just adds a cherry to the cake.
It does indeed, right? So you have to look at this, and you have to realize that the environment that North Korea was created under, it no longer exists. The Cold War system no longer exists. China and Russia are both now, loosely committed to agreed upon rules of economic policy, even if they don't allow democracy or liberty inside their own nations. But North Korea is one of the greatest threats that's facing the United States. And it's the true growing threat of these small, failing states full of poor, ignorant citizens that are the greatest threat.
What makes you think they're the greatest threat? What have they said? What have they said that's made you think that? They're clearly a great threat to their own people. You've established that, and we all agree with you. What makes you think they're a threat to us, provided we don't attack them? Well,
as I've already stated a couple of times now, North Korea is going to put Japan into a position, and I'm not sure if you guys have been reading foreign wires on stuff like this, but there's more and more discussion in Japan now about Japan becoming nuclearized. That's a disaster for the people of the United States. It's a disaster for everybody because it forces China to become more aggressive, which then in turn puts the United States in a position that has to be more aggressive. I mean, do you guys, is this a point that's just falling on deaf ears? Do you guys think that it's not true?
No, I don't no, it's not falling on deaf ears. It's an argument, and it's
the reality of what's going to happen. Now, you really want Japan to have nuclear weapons on top of everything else?
Well, there's a point though where if we're undertaking all of these missions to make sure that we're the world's police, when does it cease that we are actually a policeman and actually a tyrant? I mean, if we are doing this everywhere in the world, you're making the case for going into yet another country. I'm baffled by where it is in that quote that you think that we're supposed to police the entire world under moral duty. I mean, that's kind of crazy.
I haven't said that at all. It's interesting.
No, but in that quote,
I'll finish. I'm going to answer your question. It's like I haven't advocated for any of these other invasions. I think a lot of them are quite fruitless. But I already raised the point about bad decisions being made in the past. Now a correct decision could be made because that was the basis of my original post. This would be the first morally righteous war the United States has waged. Just because the United States is waging horrible wars around the world right now doesn't mean that this one actually be one that should happen. Do you disagree?
It seems so far too late for that at this point. I mean, I don't know how you can possibly correct policy from that long ago when it's resulted in this. And we are, in fact, everywhere on the planet. I mean, yes, that might be not what you advocated, but at the same time, it is our reality.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I just think that's kind of used as a crutch argument to say that North Korea should be left alone.
Well, okay. All right. Let me come at this. Okay. So you didn't agree with the wars. You didn't agree with Iraq or Afghanistan or Libya or Syria.
Right? Kind of. I mean, I'm of the position that despotic leaders should be removed from power. That's a similar argument to, I think Christopher Hitchens would be making this same argument against North Korea. He made the argument towards the invasion of Iraq, not because Iraq posed a great and grievous threat, but because he wanted Saddam Hussein to be removed from power. Similarly, Kim Jong-un needs to be removed from power. But if that were to happen, it's not like, somebody just going to shoot this guy in the face and that's going to end all the ills of the world. Because after his father died, the generals of North Korea attempted to have a coup against him and to take power. And then, of course, he executed them, including his uncle and people like that. Yeah. So there needs to be more than just one individual who is killed here. The entire regime. So
because he killed. Okay, I mean, killing his uncle. It's sad. I don't know his uncle. I don't know other people that he's killed. Lots of people, absolutely, and we've killed. His brother was really cool too. And we've killed lots of people too. And I'm not saying we're the same as North Korea, but
I hope not.
Yeah, I'm not. But morally, there is a spectrum here, and we're on that spectrum.
It's so strange. You bring up morality constantly. Where's the morality of allowing 25 million people to live as abject slaves the entirety of their existence? Where's the morality in that?
Where's the
one who's bringing up the moral argument?
Where's the morality in jeopardizing tens of millions of people with a nuclear holocaust for the state of hubristically going into North Korea and you mentioned yourself that you have no idea what military strategy we'd be using. So you actually have no idea what you're even saying in terms of the military side of it. Right?
Come on now.
But I'm right.
One can recognize evil in the world without having the perfect answer to the situation. Now, it just seems that it gets whitewashed to me, that you guys don't care, that the people of North Korea live in these horrible...
You can't answer the question, the basic question.
What's the question? What is the question?
The question is this. Is it worth liberating North Korea to risk nuclear holocaust?
I think that question's incomplete because it's not taking into account what happens when North Korea forces Japan to have a nuclear weapon, and the risk, as you put it, of nuclear holocaust becomes even greater. That's something that hasn't been touched on by any of you in this entire segment. Why not? Crickets.
I'm sorry. Repeat the scenario.
I've said it numerous times. If you guys
you think Japan's going to become? Do you think Japan's going to nuke us? Is that
no? I don't think. No. Am I talking in tongues over here? Japan will become nuclearized if North Korea continues its belligerence. That's bad for everybody. It's bad because it makes China very, very uneasy. Right?
Is it worse?
North Korea's belligerence is because of the U.S.'s aggression. So if we kind of back off.
So they say, right? Yeah. So people just leave them alone. If they just get left alone, we're in the same position that we were in the 1950s, right? Just leave them alone. Nothing's going to happen.
So the threat of a nuclear Japan is worse to you than the direct statement by the leader of North Korea that if we attack him, that he's going to start a nuclear war.
I'm saying to you that if Japan were to obtain a nuclear weapon, that it's going to increase the likelihood of nuclear war between China and Japan, and then suck the United States, which has a defense agreement with Japan, into that conflict. Right? We're looking at a chessboard. We're just talking about pieces that are going to be made further down the line. So,
right, but you're not playing chess. You want to go right in and just knock the king and queen around.
Hey, listen. I'm saying that if you don't do that, look what's going to happen. I mean, do you guys disagree that China's going to be in great favor and do absolutely nothing if Japan announces that they are going to start assembling nuclear weapons too?
I'm not in a position to speculate on that.
I don't know. It's not my fault. We've had this plan for many weeks, right? It's going to happen, right? You can look it up anywhere you want to.
Well, just the same way that you don't know the military strategy would be used.
I don't know the military strategy either. It's not the same point for me not knowing and laying out to you on anti-media radio about how I would go on and invade North Korea.
Look at the facts on the board. It's a very simple equation. North Korea. Look at what North Korea said. We will not attack anyone unless you attack us. So if we attack them, they're going to nuke someone. Okay, so that's a bad policy. You know why? Because it results in a nuclear war. That's just logic. I don't understand how you can disagree with that.
I don't agree with any. Listen, when you look at the rhetoric of the North Korean government, and based on what they tell their citizens that they send supplies to the United States to help our poor country, and that's why sometimes people don't have enough to eat in North Korea. To believe that the North Korean government is telling the truth about anything, and for you to just accept it and eat it with a spoon, that's what's strange to me.
Well, multiple military experts have been gauging this since 2006, and independent watchdogs and military watchdogs have said that they have significantly upped the ante, and that they have a hydrogen bomb, and that they have an ICBM that can deliver it to the West Coast. I don't know where the equivocation is here. No one's whitewashing anything about the plight of the North Korean people. We're trying to avoid a nuclear holocaust here. You seem to turn away from that question every time it's brought up.
No, I'm saying that the threat of a nuclear holocaust becomes even greater down the road.
Because of Japan?
Yes.
One of our biggest allies?
No, yes. Japan's one of our biggest allies, and they will suck China into a conflict. China will become the aggressor in this situation.
China and Japan. Right? So you're saying China and Japan will go to...
Now listen, I have a little bit of sympathy because this is a point that you weren't aware of. But I mean, surely you can look at a map and see that that's what the reality of it is going to be, right? So it's either go and dismantle North Korea soon, or have an even greater problem on our hands. That's the reality of the situation. How is that going to happen? I don't know. I'm not a military person, all right? I don't have a little map with tanks and
I don't know what's going to happen.
Mapping stuff out.
Let's just bomb a country that wants to nuke us. Let's see what happens. That seems to be your argument because we want to save people.
No, that's not my argument at all. My argument is that it's going to get worse and that it should have happened long ago.
Well, I agree with you there. But as far as the current state of things...
Listen, I didn't say I was going to win. I was just going to raise these points because they're not being raised by anybody.
No, and I appreciate that. And for all the vitriol we put out there, I mean, I greatly respect you, and I hope it's mutual. And, this is a tough issue. We just happen to disagree on it. And, it's no one wants to be in nuclear war. And no one wants war, period. And unfortunately, we have dictatorships in the world. I just think that when I look at if I had seen North Korea attacking other countries, I might be a little bit more on your side. But I have not seen them attacking other countries. I've seen them remain sovereign. And yes, there's an absolute humanitarian crisis going on over there, but there's many countries in which there are millions and millions of people suffering.
So should the United States government have a different posture of starting to eliminating these atrocities? You know, are you at least in favor of that, of eliminating some of the suffering in the world from these horrible dictators who profit from the blood and from the sweat of their citizens?
Isn't that what we've ostensibly been doing for the last 15 years?
No, that's not at all what's been happening, and you and I both know that. You know that's a disingenuous question, and you didn't answer my question, right? Do you think the United States should be eliminating these horrible regimes one by one, right? Isn't that kind of the point of the United States? The United States is all of its military might to create a better world. Just because the United States has been horrible, absolutely horrible, and has invaded nations for the wrong reasons,
you just answered
it does not mean that the ideals of the United States still do not exist.
You just answered your own question.
Different.
No, we shouldn't be doing that because of our track record of doing it for the last 60 or 70 years.
And look what the wonderful isolationism of Woodrow Wilson bought us. Look what the isolationism with North Korea bought us, right? Look what we got.
Well, look, if we could time travel back 15 years and take on North Korea, I might have been a fan of that. But at this point, that ship has sailed.
Well, it's just the fact that isolationism no longer works in a globalized economy.
We haven't been practicing isolationism.
That's what's being advocated for. You know, more and more Americans are in favor of isolationism without realizing.
Yeah, every few decades, it's nice to take a year off from like unilateral imperialism, you know, and in this case, it's because of nuclear weapons. And I understand the point you're making, but I think you're really overlooking the seriousness of this situation, which is you claim that we're overlooking the seriousness of the situation. I think you are, because I think you're not taking seriously the risk of a nuclear holocaust.
And I think that tonight, when you go to sleep in your bed peacefully and you wake up and you have breakfast,
I don't sleep in bed.
Well, sometimes it depends where, but the individuals in North Korea aren't going to sleep peacefully, and they're going to wake up to another day of terror, not knowing if the government's going to execute them and their families for not looking in the right direction. That's a very horrible thing, right? So yeah, it's cannot turn a blind eye to this any longer.
All right, that's it for us. Lou, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
Great discussion. Thank you to everyone for joining.
This is live through the stereo. Go and let it blow through the stereo. I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo. This is live through the stereo. Go and let it blow through the stereo. I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo.